We are recording with Dr. Tenpenny on Tuesday, September 10th, 2024 at 2:09 p.m. Eastern time. And you have been on here before, and you were just asking me beforehand how I got into this, and you got to witness firsthand the gift of gab as I can just throw a Niagara Falls of words at people. And yeah, so that's the long answer. But Dr. Tenpenny, please introduce yourself, and then we can just jump into whatever.
Well, I'm a osteopathic physician. My first career was being board certified in emergency medicine and the director of a level 2 trauma center for 12 years. Then my business partner in that venture, Dr. Dave Fronczek, died at the age of 32 with metastatic kidney cancer, and it wasn't fun working in the ER anymore. And that was about the time the Eisenstein study came out talking about integrative medicine. I moved to Cleveland in 1996 and started an integrative medicine clinic, which is still there. We're always proud to say that we've seen patients from all 50 states and about 20 foreign countries that come to get well and get off their pharmaceutical drugs. In September of 2000, I went to the National Vaccine Information Center meeting in Washington, D.C., and um, came home and said, how did I miss information about vaccines? I grew up in a chiropractic family. I was not vaccinated as a kid, never really gave vaccines much of a thought. When I came home from that meeting, I said, well, maybe I better look into this. And that looking into that, I've spent 24 years as of this month, 24 years. And really, it's not an exaggeration to say more than 50,000 hours researching problems and educating people on the problems associated with vaccines.
That's quite a jump to go from to heading up a trauma, a level two trauma center. I mean, that's the definition of like calm under fire. Do you find peace in that? And by that I mean, you know, the most peace I've ever felt, other than working towards this podcast, was probably being pre-med, and that might sound counterintuitive, but to me, just having more work than I could handle forced me to just you don't have time to procrastinate. And I found great. I mean, I know I sound like a psychopath, but I found probably the most peace ever was like studying for organic chemistry. Like I just so is that did you find peace in that? Is that something that you just it's the cacophony of tasks kind of
I don't know that
focuses you?
I could say I found peace in that. I wouldn't define it that way,
Sure.
but it's forced me. From the time I was in high school, I was very driven. And like, for example, back in the day when I was in high school, they had 9 classes in one day. So each class was about 35, 40 minutes long. And so 9 times 5, there were 45 classes a week. And I had 2 study halls a week. The rest of the time was filled with academic classes or with music things, because I got all the music awards in high school. So when I went to college, we were on the quarter system, and most people took about between 12 and 14 credit hours of classes per quarter. And I took 27 to 28, worked
What?
part-time, and was a music minor. And so when I went to medical school, I was already pretty driven and highly organized. And so when I was in medical school, I learned to manage my time by something called, I never had to do lists. I always had to do spreadsheets. And so I would put 7 a.m. to 1 a.m. down the left-hand column, and I would put Sunday through Saturday across the top. And I would block out when all the classes were and when my study was. I even blocked out when I exercised and
Uh-huh.
what my favorite television shows were, and things like that. And I have continued to use that system of to-do spreadsheets my whole life. And so, and I've, right now I have 5 LLCs. I have a whole bunch of employees all over the country, including Canada. Um, and I'm right now I'm not seeing patients in my clinic, but I was seeing patients, full time, and managing all the businesses and speaking and writing. And so I've been driven like that ever since I was in high school. I can't say I found peace in that, but being highly organized and being able to move all these balls down the road at the same time, um, it's just who I am. It's just who I've determined to be.
Maybe not peace. but satisfaction.
Um, I like to be really organized. I mean, my house is very organized. I like, whenever I get really super stressed out about something, I can always tell when it's like over the top stress because I become pretty OCD about stacking and restacking papers and reorganizing books alphabetically on my thing. I'm like, stop, stop.
It's
Stop that. And so I really realize that's my trigger to know that I need to stop and take a step back and take a deep breath because there's too many things going on. And it's because it's just my way to be highly organized. And I've been that way, I don't know, since I was 14, maybe.
you're speaking to my soul. I always knew I was OCD to a degree. I actually ended up having to go do OCD therapy at Mount Sinai because it was so bad. I mean, I couldn't function. And I think on one of like the tests, I scored like right under hospitalization. And they're
No.
like, I mean, like that. I mean, like bad, bad, not like the quirky. I'm so OCD. I mean, like you know, OCD. And but at the time when I went there, it was like 5 years after I was in college, and they're like, "Yeah, you're just below the threshold." And in my mind, I'm like, "This is the least OCD as I've ever been in my life." And like, I was like, "Wow." But like, I mean, same thing, exercise, and I mean, I have my. Let's pull it up right now. I mean, I do to-do lists, but I mean that's my daily, every single to run the podcast. I have everything and little red dots when they're clear. I do green dots, but I've found that, OCD is something that you have to, I don't, it's like what Hunter S. Thompson said about fear. He said, fear is a wild animal. Let it pull your cart because it's good at that, but keep a shotgun trained on it in case it turns on you. And that's kind of how I look at OCD. I'm like, this is like a very powerful jet engine. If you can direct it and guide it, you can get a lot done. It will suck you in and turn you into hamburger meat. So that you're speaking to my soul when the same thing is I know I'm very stressed or I'm mentally all over the place when the OCD jumps up a notch and things I don't normally care about, it gets even worse. I'm like, I got to dust off the top of these stools. I got to make sure all the plates are perfect. And to me, that's like the little red flashing light where it's like you're going overboard. And kind of the only way I've found to remedy that is not to do all the tasks because it's a fool's errand. You'll go forever. You can't out OCD, but rather to meditate and to just slow it down. And it goes against every instinct. Your OCD says work more, put more away. And the I guess the antidote to it is turning everything off, sitting down, and just for 20 or 30 minutes, just kind of letting your mind, it's like a toddler, just let it run itself out and then it slows down. Is so when you're stressed or you're got too much on your plate and you find yourself over OCDing, what is, if you don't mind sharing, what is your remedy to it?
Um, I used to be when I was in high school, I was a concert pianist. In fact, when I was a senior in college, I had to decide if I was going to go on to medical school or if I was going to go into music because I'd won all the music awards and I played piano and there were 18 pianists in my group at the University of Toledo. And University of Toledo in Ohio had a really, really robust music department. And of the 18 pianists, I was ranked number 2 or 3 consistently above all the people who were majoring in piano, even though my major was in pre-med. And so I had to make a decision. And I decided, I went into medicine instead of music because I have really small hands. I mean, like I could just barely reach an octave. And I knew that I could always be good, but I could never be great because,
Uh,
people who are really great pianists have those really long, thin fingers. They can reach, more than an octave, which is 8 notes. They could reach 12 or 14 notes. Some of them really would be. And I knew I could never be at, I played national competitions and did quite well, but I was really good, but I knew I could never be great. And I really didn't want to make a living. I didn't want to teach piano. I didn't want to teach a bunch of, first and second and third graders piano. It was just not my thing. So I figured if I went into medicine, I could always do music, but I didn't have to do music for a living. So when I get really stressed out, I just sit down at the piano and just play for a while. It just sort of like all of that just sort of dissipates and goes away. Put your mind over more in the right, on your right brain of your creative side, and just things just kind of go away. So I do that, or I have a really lovely backyard, or I'll go sit out in the backyard and listen to the crickets and the birds and just and smell the fresh air and just sort of relax a little bit. That's what I'll do.
Mm. In terms of the knowing you can be good but not great, that's something I always kind of think about is like, what is the line between being realistic and quitting? Like, I loved basketball in middle school and high school and eventually stopped loving it. But even then, I'm a 5'8" white guy. I think there is probably like an upper limit to that, and like, I don't, and it's just, I loved it. I really did. But there is also like a moment of rationality where it's like the shortest player in the NBA is like what, like, or the shortest starter is like what. You ever like watch basketball? You'd see like Allen Iverson. You're like, that guy's so tiny, and then you see him in an interview after the game, and he's like 3 feet taller than a reporter, and you're like, oh, that's the shortest guy on the, and he's a monster. And so that's not why I stopped. I stopped because I just kind of lost a love for it. But there is, I don't really, it's like a hard thing for me to wrestle that when is when is it being realistic and when is it giving up? Like, I don't think there's really any like upper ceiling to doing podcasting. I have a brain that works and I can, my mouth and vocal cords function. I have a microphone, I have an internet connection. That kind of seems to be the prerequisite. But I don't really think there's an upper limit. It, where would you say, what do you think that is? Then the how much of it was you knew you could be good but not great versus you kind of maybe lost the passion to a degree for.
I didn't ever really lose the passion. I really didn't. I played in competitions, right? In fact, my senior recital in college was 120 pages of memorized music. I did a larger end exit interview, music interview, and big concert as turns of my senior year in college than was required for even the music majors. So I never lost the passion of it. I just I like I said, I just have small hands and I just know what it would take to play for there was the gal who was first in the department who was the number one chair in our of our piano people in the department. She went on to play for the Toledo Symphony and the Chicago Symphony, and then after that, I kind of lost track of her. But I was never as good as Betsy, never. I mean, and she just had those long, skinny fingers, and she just had the ability. She was just better than me. It's like you sometimes you're a B plus or you're an A minus. You're not a superstar. And I knew that was not how I wanted to make a living, and it
Mhm.
wasn't what I want. And having music and having playing the piano and being part of musical things, whether it's in church or whether it's privately or things like that, it's something that you can always have, but you didn't need to do that commodity to make a living at it, which would be really, really hard if you're not really, really good. And
Mhm.
so I was just a realist about it, that I could go on to medical school, which I had decided when I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a doctor. I grew up in a chiropractic family and sat around listening to my dad and my uncles. And I had my father, my grandfather, my father, three uncles and two cousins were chiropractors when I was growing up. So, and they would sit around the dinner table or sit around the campfire talking about cases that they saw and different things that they did. And so from the time I was probably 4 years old, I wanted to go to medical school and never really considered much, only a couple of other things in my entire career. So it was just something that I decided, I wanted to go ahead and do. I really liked the academics. And, when I was growing up, smart people were the ones that went to medical school. It was only the smart kids. It was very highly selective, highly competitive. And I am just, as you can probably tell, a pretty competitive person. And so, it was just the road that I wanted to go on. What was pretty interesting was that when I got, as an osteopath, you do 4 years of medical school, then a 1 year of a rotating internship, which is a 12-month cycle. You start July the 1st, and you go through, you do rotations like 3 months of surgery, 3 months of pediatrics, 3 months of internal medicine, and then, or 2 months of internal medicine. Then you've got room for electives, like if you want to do orthopedics or ENT or, gastroenterology or whatever you want to do. So you've got rooms for that. So so I've gone through an entire year from July 1st. This is now June 15th of the following year. And everybody had gotten accepted into residency programs and they were going on to their next level of training. I hadn't even applied for a residency because I was having such a good time at what I was doing. And every rotation I went on, like the orthopedist said, you should go into surgery. The surgeon said, you should go into surgery. The internist said, you should go into intensive care. The cardiologist said, you're really good at this. You should go into cardiology. So I never really had a clear direction of where to go with my career. I had 2 weeks left to where I was going to be an unemployed medical school graduate. I didn't have a next step. And two of my best friends, actually three, there were three guys that were at the same hospital I was. Two of them were in an anesthesia residency, and one was in general surgery headed towards orthopedics. And all three of them had done a few years of emergency medicine before they chose their career. And they said, Sherri, you were super smart. You're good at everything. Everybody thinks you should be, an internist or a surgeon or whatever. So why don't you go out and do ER for a couple of years, and then you can kind of hone into what you really want to specialize in. I said, well, I didn't really have many other options at that choice, and it sounded like a good idea to me. So I started into emergency medicine, and I really, really loved it. I loved the thrill and the challenge and the stress. I was a real stress junkie, and I loved I mean, I loved it. The busier the ER was and the more traumatic things that were in at the same time, the better. It was almost like I would downshift to a lower gear and just, go through it. I never got rattled. I always loved the stress. And I really liked the variety. I didn't like doing the same thing all the time. I liked the variety of not knowing what was coming in the in next, and you could do pediatrics or cardiology or orthopedics or major trauma or cardiac arrest or whatever you were doing. And I really liked that. But emergency medicine, it's a high stress job. And it's really, we used to always refer to it as a young person's sport. After you've been doing it about 10 years, you just really do get rather frazzled and burned out, and you want to move into teaching, or you want to move into an office practice and do something different, because the stress and the swing shifting on your sleep and all that stuff really does get to you after a while. And my business partner, Dr. Dave Frodzek, who we had been together for about 6 years, when Dave died, it just wasn't fun anymore without him, because we had done everything together for about 6 years, and we were just really, really good friends. And he was an exceptionally good physician. And I was only able to hire him because he had lots of job offers that offered him a lot more money than I had to be able to offer him. But he drove stock cars. And I was the only person of all the people he interviewed with that was willing to put in writing that he could have every Saturday night off from April to October to race his stock cars on Saturday night. And he said, I'll work every weekend from October to April, every weekend, if I can have, Friday night and Saturday night going forward. And he was such a good doc, and he was such a good guy. And I said, yeah. And he said, and then if possible, I only want to work nights. It's every ER doctor, director's dream come true, that you don't have to swing shift. So I put Dave on the schedule for all nights because that's what he wanted. And I wanted to work all days because that's what I wanted. And then we had three other people in our emergency medicine group that kind of swift around. And so it was really good. And when I finally decided that I needed to do something different after that Eisenstein study came out, I subscribed to the Townsend Letter, which is a magazine, monthly magazine that comes out on holistic and integrative medicine. And most of the articles are written by fellow colleagues in integrative medicine, sort of like case reports, and talking to and doing some research on maybe a particular vitamin or a case report about something. And on the last 2 pages of the magazine, when you get it in the month, the first thing I would do is I would open up to the last 2 pages, which would be the list of all of the upcoming training courses in the next few months. And since I was the director of the ER and we made our schedule out 2 months in advance, I would open it up, find the course I wanted to go to, plug in my time off and then build everybody else around my schedule. And so, and I did that for 2 years, and that's how I got trained in holistic medicine, and when it was time to leave, I just was ready to make the leap. And so, I'm back in the days of, integrative medicine. I mean, now they have A4M and, the anti-aging people, the ISOM group and, there's various different training groups to train people in integrative medicine. Back when I was coming up through it, it was sort of self-taught. And when I was still in the ER, um, back in the 80s and the early 90s, um, you sort of had one main place that you worked, and then you would moonlight in a bunch of other places. And there was a little tiny ER in the hospital up the road that I would moonlight at, and I got to be pretty good friends with the guy who was the medical director for that ER. And it was, I don't know, one night, 3 o'clock in the morning, we're sitting in the break room talking, and I said, I'm kind of considering going back and doing an ER residency. He said, why? He said, "You've been doing this for 3 years. You're the best doc that we have. Why would you go do that?" I said, just to have the piece of paper." And he said, "Well," he said, "here's how you do your own residency." He said, "All the people that come in, the subspecialists like the orthopedist, the podiatrist, the plastic surgeon guy, all that thing." He said, "Just glue yourself up to them and pick their brain. And you know where your deficits are. You know the things you know well and the things that you don't know well." He said, "So just glue yourself up to the expert and fill in the gaps of those things." It was the best advice ever because that's how I got to be a really, really good ER doc. And I was still able to board certified into emergency medicine because I was in that group. I'm old. I'm really old. I've been doing this a long time. And so you could still board certify in emergency medicine, but I did a tailor-made educational program specific to filling in the gaps of the problems that, it's like I didn't know a lot about feet and ankles. So I would, anytime an orthopod would come in and be doing something with foot and ankles, I would always be there asking questions. I really got to be real. I was as good at plastic surgery repairs, like on the face and the skin and things, better than the plastic guys were. And the nurses would beg me to not call in the plastic surgeon for a consult and do the sutures myself because I was so good at it. And so I trained myself, and those that are old people like me that were doing this for a long time, that was how we learned things. That's how we learned integrative medicine, that you learned to think and think through problems. You would do it from a place of anatomy and physiology and biochemistry. You wouldn't just go symptom pill, symptom pill, symptom pill, symptom pill, like the way young people are trained now and the way that young doctors react. They treat everything by algorithms. And if you don't fall into the correct algorithm, then there's something wrong with you. And here's your Prozac, your antidepressant, and, go see the
Mhm.
psychiatrist. So it's been an interesting career. It's been interesting along the way.
So what you're saying about ER stress junkie, the busier, that's I think I use the wrong term, or maybe I define it differently in my own head. That's what I mean by peace. Is
Mm.
it's like it's what you want. So
Mm.
maybe not peace in like the like yeah, I get that. I mean, and I've done it. Meditation's great, and but to me that's like a means to I use that to calm myself down so I used to meditate in college like 5 times a day for like 20 minutes because if I found if I studied for 90 minutes, I would start to diminishing returns. And then if I meditated, it would all come back. So I was like tactically using meditation. It's like the Buddhist detachment from the physical world. I was like, no, I was using it so I could achieve more in the physical world. It was a weird counterintuition, but that's what I mean by peace is it's what you want. I mean, it's you can't do it forever, but I mean the for me the best feeling is when I've just got so much to do in such a small amount of time. I love the focus. I just my buddy was like you in college. He uh, bass player, musician, had all the time in the world to do that. Perfect GPA, perfect MCAT. He's a doctor now. But I remember I used to ask him, I'd be like, how do you like you go out on Friday night and go get drunk? And I'm like, I have to study all weekend. And he'd be like, there is no stronger He was like, you don't need Adderall or caffeine. He was like, the fear of waking up on Sunday morning and knowing you have a test. He's like, that it's laser accuracy. And so I think that's what I mean by peace is it's something that fills up your soul. I don't know if it's peace, satisfaction, fulfillment, just, you know, a feeling, I don't know, a sigh of relief. But that's what I meant by peace was the thing where you just feel like it's a shoe that fits perfectly. You're like, this is where I belong. And I was gonna ask, so someone like you that loves doing all this, and I don't even know if it's metaphysical or religious, whatever this question is, but do you ever feel that, I don't know, like I've tried to like diagnose like why do I like doing all this work? Like why do I want to help? Like why do I get so much satisfaction and I don't want to take time off. I want to work and make things better and better and better. And the best explanations I could have for myself is this is how God made me. Like, all right. The other thing is like maybe this is how an enzyme feels.
Hmm.
You think an enzyme is ever like, oh, I gotta cleave more molecules, or do you think it just wakes up and it's like, let's go. I have to cleave 100 trillion, CO2 molecules today. I love it. Like morning coffee, like let's go. And it doesn't, it's what it's for. That's the best I've been able to like figure out what is my purpose on this earth, in this solar system, in this galaxy is like I think I'm a human enzyme. I want to make the world better. I want to do something in the field of mental health in memory of my brother, be it a med school or a therapy or whatever. But that's the best I've been able to like figure out what am I doing here. Did you ever go into that, or is that like a fruitless, I don't know, spiral? Because you'll never find out like what really is going on. Like I don't know, we're hominids, we stand upright, and we're on the earth, and there seems to be a biosphere, and there's a sun, and we can see pretty far out. We think we came from like the woods as monkeys, and then the fossil record before that, and the planet was formed in a secretion disk, and then there's X, Y, Z coordinates, and then time. Do you ever wonder like what it all is and what it is you're doing here, or is that just like, eh, do you just brush it off?
I don't really take any deep dives down into that. I'm a Christian and I spend a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time on doing Christian things. Like I get up every morning and, when I take my vitamins and I make my little drink, my little cardio miracle drink that I take, then I sit down and I read my Bible for a half an hour, 45 minutes before
Mm-hmm.
I go to the bathroom and get in the shower and
Mm-hmm.
do things and start my day. And I write 2 Substacks a week. And one is called On Walking with God, which comes out on Sunday. And so I just feel like I just listen and go where God leads. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't see, and a lot of times it's not exactly where I want to go. It's like me fighting, like, wait a minute, God, you got this? You sure you got this right?
I'm taking a wrong turn. Use the GPS.
But
Turn right. And you're
I
like,
used
no,
I used to
no.
say a long time ago that, I don't belong on this planet. I just don't feel like I belong here. From the time I've been probably 7, I really saw what was going on in the world and really was not connected to a lot of people. I never bought the mainstream narrative on just about anything. And I used to kiddingly say, I turned left at that cosmic intersection instead of right and ended up on Earth, and here I am. If I'm going to be here, I want to make the most of it. I want to leave something behind that may be of value after I've passed on. So that's why I've done all the vaccine research and been involved in all the vaccines. I mean, every time I go to a conference, people say, you have helped thousands and thousands of people, more people that you'll ever know. I mean, when you die and meet your maker, and have your life review, you will see how many thousands, probably tens of thousands of people all around the world, have read you, heard you, listened to your DVDs back in the day when we were doing DVDs, or read your books or something like that, and didn't vaccinate their kids or didn't get the COVID shot. or didn't do these things. And so you've really made a big difference. And so I just do what I do and I just move forward, and ask God to direct my steps. I don't spend a lot of time, trying to figure out what I'm supposed to do. It's what I'm doing.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. This I grew up going to Catholic school and became like an atheist at like 15 or 16, and then back to Christianity at like 30, I think. Through this podcast, I interviewed Charlie Duke, who's one of three men alive who have walked on the moon. And he said that, going to the moon was awesome, but then he came back and he was just wildly depressed because it's like there's truly nothing else to do. Like and he came back to God and he said the only thing better than walking on the moon is walking with God or walking with Christ. And that led me back into it. But yeah, that's kind of how I anchor it whenever I start to rizzle off into the like what is going on, what is reality. I just kind of go, I think I'm here to just kind of do the best I can to make things somewhat better. And what you're saying about helping people is like being so OCD. When I was pre-med, I bought all the MCAT study guides and a lot of them overlapped, but I hated that some specialized in other aspects, exam crackers or Kaplan or Berkeley or whatever. And I was like, wow, how come there isn't one like super MCAT study? Like, what is this? And so I took it upon myself to make these like study guides. I mean, on like thousands of pages long on Microsoft Word or PowerPoint. And I scored in the 96th percentile on the MCAT. And after I did that, I was like, well, I have all these study guides that I put so much time into. So I just uploaded them online. I was like, here you go. And over time, for years later, even when I had completely abandoned the pursuit of medicine, I would still get emails from people that were like, I can't afford MCAT study guides. 3 straight cycles I got turned down. And then I found your study guide and I just got in and like, thank you. But
Wow.
multiplied like hundreds of, and that was never the purpose. The purpose was like, I got into med school. I no longer have to compete. So here you guys can have it. Like, I'm no longer competing with you. And that ended up being so much more worthwhile. Was just, I mean, truly hundreds of times over the years, just like, hey, I'm a single mother and I found this and I got in. And like, I'm a pediatrician now, or I'm a just across everywhere. And I was like, that's the coolest thing. Yeah, like it wasn't all for naught. Like, why was I pre-med? I could have been at the University of Georgia. I should have been out partying and go to football games. If I ended up deciding not to go, I wish I could go back in time. And I kind of look at it now like, no, maybe that was the point, was to make all the study guides. And that, I mean, quantifiably, that led to at least 100 people now becoming doctors. I'm like, that's kind of badass, like to have helped that. And
That's
like,
really good.
and I don't say that in like a look at me, but rather I feel what you're feeling when you're like, uh, how many people have I helped? And that's kind of what comes back to the enzyme thing. I'm like, I think I just like catalyzing stuff. I don't, I don't know much more than that. I can't figure out why, but I don't know why. And I think I don't know. I think that's through the podcast as well, interviewing all the doctors during the height of censorship and never telling people not to go get this or that, but just being like, you deserve to know. You deserve to have informed consent. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe that is the point. Maybe I am on the right path. Maybe you are on the right path. I don't know. I don't really know where I'm going with that. I just kind of trailed off into the distance. But then I guess I don't know to pull it back in. I guess what's wrestling with my mind is if you're this type A person, holistic medicine just seems to be such like from what next to nothing I know about it, seems to be just such like a slower roll than trauma medicine.
Oh,
It's
it
just
is.
like
It
the
is.
opposite ends of the spectrum.
It definitely is. I mean, you're under the gun of time and energy when you're doing trauma medicine. And, when you're sitting one-on-one with the patient in the office, you've got time. And what really interested me and why I really wanted to do that was I was just so tired of working in the ER and just putting a patch on it. You know, excuse me, I felt like working in the emergency room was like was high dollar per hour assembly line work. The person comes in, you work on them, do send them home. The next person comes in, you do whatever, you order tests, X-rays, you do whatever, put stitches, excuse me, put stitches in them, whatever, and you send them home. And got paid a lot of money to do. Excuse me, I'm sorry.
You're
Um,
right.
got got paid a lot of money to do that. ER docs make 2 to 3 times the amount that we made back in the day. But still, relatively, we had a good lifestyle, good cost of living, way we earn money. But it was boring. I found it to be extremely boring because it was so superficial. You just worked on whatever. If they had chest pain, you just worked on that. But you never really figured out, why did they have the chest pain? Where did that come from? And it was more than just a blocked artery or something. It was
Mm.
lifestyle. It was CoQ10. It was different, supplements and things that they needed. And you never got down to the root cause of why anybody had anything. And it was felt like superficial, kind of boring, high dollar per hour assembly line work. In the last probably year and a half that I was in the ER, honestly, I felt like I spent more time looking at the clock. Like, oh my gosh, it's only been 5 minutes since I last looked at the clock. It's like I spent more time looking at the clock, like, how much longer do I have to be here? How many more patients do I have to see? Than actually enjoying the work of going in and seeing a patient and taking care of them. And it's a very different thing when you have an office practice, like, Tenpenny Integrated Medical Center is the name of my clinic. It's here in Cleveland, Ohio. And, you have the luxury of time. You do an hour to an hour and a half on a new patient visit. You have a half an hour follow-up visit. I mean, when you're in the ER, you have like 5 minutes. And so it's a very, very different type of medicine and a very, very different focus. And it's gratifying in a whole different way. In the ER, you know, you don't realize that it's kind of like what they say about anesthesia. To be an anesthesiologist, it's 99% boring and 1% sheer terror is how they talk about it. Well, emergency medicine is probably 90% routine, just routine stuff, and 10% high stress. You have like if you have a rollover car accident with 7 critical patients that come in at the same time, and then while you're dealing with all that, you get a cardiac arrest that comes in the door. That doesn't happen very often. And you don't have like really, really high stress like you see on television, or if you remember the show ER, or you remember, any emergency medicine sort of things, it's because it's a drama, it's television. Yes, you see that in the emergency room, maybe 1 or 2% of the entire month or year that you're there. It doesn't happen very often. Mostly it's pretty routine care. And it's like earaches and sore throats and sprained ankles and minor lacerations and maybe a broken wrist or a broken bone that you x-rayed and called the orthopedist. I mean, it's pretty routine work, except for on the occasion when you really feel like it's very stressful. And in those moments, you are making literally life and death decisions for that person's life. Those are the days that ER docs live for. It's like in between, it's like where you really feel like all of your training and experience and knowledge about emergency medicine and life-saving things comes together in that minute. But it doesn't happen very often. I
Mm.
mean, just because it just doesn't. Unless you are working in like Maryland shock trauma, that's all they see is incoming helicopters of the worst from all over the Northeast region. That's what they do day in and day out. Every single patient is like a, life or death situation. The vast majority of emergency departments in a community hospital are just not like that. And that's probably a good thing because, I don't think unless you're really built for that, I don't think you could do that day in and day out for years and years and years. And so, seeing people in an office practice and in particularly holistic medicine, which offers a whole different set of tests that most conventional doctors don't even know exist. urine tests and saliva tests and unique types of blood tests, unique types of IV therapies and things like that. They don't even know exist. And unfortunately, because they don't know it exists, they say, well, if it doesn't exist, if it's not in my wheelhouse, then it's not any good and it's just quack medicine and it doesn't mean anything. And so most conventional doctors aren't very open-minded to learn other things. They're like, this is what I learned in medical school. Don't confuse me with any new information. Don't tell me there's something else to learn out there. And for years, I was on the executive committee of the hospital for probably 7 or 8 years of the 12 years I was there. And like I said, I was the first DO on an all MD medical staff. I was only 4 women on the medical staff, and I was the youngest person on the medical staff, and really tried to make some inroads and kind of get some of these old geezers to open their brains and realize there was something more to medicine than just passing out prescriptions for a living. It really didn't work.
Mhm.
It was really just the way that it was.
Yeah, it's a different kind of I guess it's a different kind of problem is to find out like the core of it. It's the workout thing. It's the I got to get the best Under Armour clothes and the newest whey protein, and then I'm taking this fish oil and it. Hey man, like the unsexy truth is you just got to go do some push-ups. Oh, well, I got to lose weight, so I'm doing hardcore carnivore now, and then I'm doing intermittent fasting with ice baths, and it's like, hey, thermodynamics, calories in, calories out. And I know there's obviously more to nutrition than that. Weight gain is calories in, calories out. And building muscle, well, I don't like the idea of no pain, no gain. That's muscle. It's just what it is. Make peace with it. If it's not hurting, you're wasting your time. But that's a different, I mean, I don't know. It's a different kind of rush, I suppose, is you just want to see just target after target as I imagine trauma medicine versus holistic is just slowing it all down and diagnosing the machine at its core. It's like, well, why did this happen? Right? It's yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's in a way it's kind of the same thing. It's the full scale, it's I don't know, it's like you're using all your brain slowly to
Well,
diagnose and
sort of. It's really, really understanding and digging deep into anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry instead of just, most physicians, allopathically trained physicians, they think real medicine is surgery and pharmacology, when real medicine is understanding anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry. Biochemistry is what you eat, drink, and breathe. Nutrition, physiology is what's in and what's out, what you take in and what you eliminate. Anatomy is muscles, but organs and bones, and really understanding the interplay between them. And, by the time you get to medical school, you have, taken that 3 times. You took it when you were in high school, anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry, which got you interested in probably going to medical school. You took it in college because you had to take it for the MCATs. And then by the time you get into medical school, it's like, I already know this stuff and you're not really interested. I really want to learn real medicine,
Mhm.
which you think is pharmacology and surgery. But real medicine is anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry. It's sort of like when you go to see a CPA, you expect them to know a little bit about accounting and taxes and, business building. When you go to see a lawyer, you expect them to know the law. When you go to see a plumber, you expect the plumber to know something about piping and laws and rules and things like that. When you go to see a doctor, the doctor should be an expert in anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry. You don't have a symptom, which is a warning sign. You don't have a symptom because you're drug deficient, and you need to have that pharmaceutical to like bring everything back into play. You have a symptom because your body's anatomy, physiology, and biochemistry is dysregulated. And so the difference between allopathic medicine, which just is suppressive medicine, turn off that loud beeping noise that's making a lot of noise called a symptom. And integrative medicine says, what's causing the fire alarm to go off? We're going to go look for the smoke.
Mm.
In conventional medicine, it's like, no, just pull the battery out of the fire alarm and you'll be just fine. And so it's like, and so when you do that and you're constantly suppressing symptoms, we've done a really, really good job of training Americans to believe that if they are symptom-free in the presence of a long list of pharmaceutical medications, that's health. I can't tell you how many patients over the years that would come in to see me and they would say, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm really, really, really healthy. I'm just here because I've got knee pain or, back pain or something like that as an osteopath. They come in and then I would do their history and they'd be on 6 pharmaceutical drugs. And so because they were symptom free in the presence of those 6 pharmaceutical drugs, they defined that symptom free status as being healthy. And we have trained America to believe that any symptom that we just need a pill. I had one patient that came in. I just really love the story because she got it. She was probably 5, 5'1", 5'2", probably close to 200 pounds. And her chief complaint was knee pain. And I sat there with her and I said, so your knees hurt? And she said, and we talked a little bit about it, and she said, what do you think I should do for my knees? And I just looked at her and she said, it's because I'm fat, right? And I said, well, for every extra 10 pounds of body weight that you have, you put, 5 to 15 pounds per square inch of additional pressure on your knees. So you are 150 pounds, 100 to 150 pounds overweight. Think about all the pressure that's being put on your knees. She said, you're the first doctor that was honest enough to say that to me. Everybody else wants to do x-rays and MRIs and have me have surgery and all that stuff. She said, you're right. So she left and honestly, I never saw her again. I thought maybe I offended her or something. A year later, she made an appointment to come back and see me and she wore the same clothes that she had worn on the initial visit, but she'd lost 85 pounds. So the clothes were just hanging and bagging on her. And she came in, she goes, I just wanted to tell you that your honesty and, being forthright with me and gentle enough with me to talk about, different types of ways to lose weight because she couldn't get on a treadmill. She couldn't do a bunch of exercise because her knee hurt. So we
Mm.
talked about other types of options and different types of food options. And she said, I just really took you at your word. She said, I'm going to lose another 50 pounds, but I've lost 85 pounds in the last year. And I wanted to come in and thank you for being honest with me. And I wore these same clothes so that you could see I really did lose the weight. So that's kind of the difference between integrative medicine, and that's another really good example of the difference between integrative medicine and conventional medicine is having the time to sit and make a relationship with your patient and to be honest with them without being harsh.
And that always is kind of the answer. I know you got a hard out, so we'll wrap it up. But I was gonna say, like, yeah, I mean, I had a concussion in 2022, and then after that, every time I drank alcohol, no matter what, I have a panic attack the next day. Just
Wow.
something I just cracked my head, and I hated it because it's like I work all week, and then Friday night I drank and I play some video games, and it's just the best part of the week. And finally, just it after however many doctor's visits and ER visits and going on Ativan or gabapentin, or it finally was just like, it sucks. I'm an Irish guy. You can't drink anymore. And then when I couldn't drink anymore, I'd be like, man, well, that's how I'd release during the weekend or after the weekend. I would look back at the weekend and go, I mean, I used to do like close to 400 episodes a year. And I'd be like, well, maybe you need to slow it down. Maybe if it's so dire that you need to pharmacologically be relaxed on Friday, maybe slow it down. Maybe do one episode a day. Okay. So maybe take a weekend off. And, you know, roughly 18 months, almost 2 years, just going back and forth of like, but I want to drink, but I'm having a panic attack. Well, this shouldn't happen. I'm out. And then finally, earlier this year, I was just like, that has to stop. And if it means that you have to slow down working so you're not in such a dire need to be artificially relaxed, then that's the case. And
Good
it
for
took,
you.
and I'm
Good for you.
34 and really, I haven't drank or anything since about New Year's. And it was very boring and it can still be boring, but I'm much more at peace no doctor's visits, and it sucks, but it's just what it is. There's no,
Good,
it's like, hey, you need to lose weight, your knees hurt.
good for
It's like,
you.
hey,
Yes.
alcohol plus brain anxiety, remove one of the equations or one of the variables. You don't have to like the answer. As we'll wrap it up with this quote, as Terrence McKenna said, the real trouble in life or the real difficulty in life is not finding the answer, it's facing the answer.
Mm,
And it's just like,
very well said.
hey, you can't drink. And I'm like, all right, I won't drink. All right, fine. And what would you know? My life has become radically better also in the last 9 months. So I'm like, huh, that's
Good for
maybe
you.
God was right. Maybe he wasn't stop drinking. God, are you sure you got this right? I'm like, oh yeah, no, noted. So, Dr. Tenpenny, thank you so much for your time. It was an honor talking to you. I'd love to have you on again sometime, talk about like biogerontology and life extension. I was really obsessed with that in high school and college. I'd love to talk about that sometime if you can.
Okay, sounds good. Well, you know how to get hold of me. Set it up
Yes,
through
ma'am.
Michelle, and we'll do this again sometime.
Yes,
Thanks,
ma'am.
Tommy.
Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to talking to you again. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Dr. Tenpenny, thank you for